Hi. The Romans not only defined sacred and civil recurrences over time by introducing a calendar, but also understood the importance of defining space according to sacred rules. Today we see how this logic of definition of sacred spaces fits into an understanding that goes far beyond the building of a temple, but that also concerns the foundation of cities and, on a greater level, the understanding of sacred geometry on earth, reflecting sky. At the base of the separation between sacred and a non-sacred space, there is the sacellum, an enclosure through which one enters in conditions of ritual purity to have access to the inner building, AEDES or altar, where the sacred contact with the divine may take place. Buildings dedicated to worship of one or more deities can be classified according to importance and size in the so-called AEDES, which are sanctuaries, templa, which are temples, and fanum, which are shrines. The AEDES are located on a higher basement and are accessible by a few steps. They are among the most archaic and ancient sacred places. The Romans used the term AEDES to indicate the abode of deities. A small AEDES is called aedicula. The AEDES do not need to be inaugurated, as happens for a temple, for instance, but are anyway consecrated by the pontiff and dedicated by a magistrate. The temple, also raised on a base and with a stairway access, is generally rectangular in plan and can be prostylus, that is, with a colonnade in the facade, typical of the most ancient temples of the Italic Etruscan Roman tradition. And here, for instance, we see the temple of Augustus on the very Italian Pola, or peripterus, as the temple of Diane in Merida, with an architectural enrichment of Hellenic origin, with columns all around, along all sides, although often limited to the facade and on sides, but not on the back. The ara, or altar, is located at the base of the stairway. Inside the temple there is the cell, where the simulacrum of the divinity is found, or the cells, if the temple is dedicated to the worship of several gods, called contubernales, as cohabitants of the same temple. The fanum is a shrine. It can be sacred wood or even a small building. Cicero uses the term fanum for shrines unrelated to classical tradition, in the figure of Gallo-Roman fanum of Wassau le Petit. The public rite took place in front of the temple where the altar was located. In fact, the temple was considered the house of God, to be understood as an earthly projection and manifestation of the divinity. Access to the interior of the temple was generally authorized only to priests under strict observance of ritual purity. The construction of a temple was marked by 5 phases. Votum, the promise of the construction of the temple to a god, generally as a supplication or thanksgiving on the occasion of battles, internal struggles, or natural disasters, but also for long journeys or special occasions. Locatio, the choice of the place of construction of the temple. Inaugguratio, before construction, the chosen place was delimited and sanctified by the auguri, and we will return to this part soon. Consecratio. Once the construction was completed, the pontiffs consecrated the temple to the divinity. Dedicatio. The official dedication to the god, who on that day, Dies Natalis, is celebrated with annual ceremonies. This is the day that is remembered in the calendars, as we saw in the previous lesson. The INAVGVRATIO is the heart of the foundation of a temple, and it is important to understand its contents in order to appreciate its deep meaning. The place chosen through the locatio had to be freed from sacred use with a series of actions, not only limited to rituals, called effatio liberatio. Then the place had to be inaugurated by the augur, who was in charge to define and declare the sacred space called templum. The augur, with the veiled head and the litus on the right hand, facing south, invoked the gods and then used to trace 2 perpendicular axes with the litus in the sky, dividing the sky into 4 regions or quadrants. The southern quadrant was called Antica, the northern quadrant Postica. To the left of the augur, to the east, there was the region called Familiaris, with auspicious signs, and to the west, the region called Hostilis, with inauspicious signs. The augur, remaining in the origin of the axis and facing south, invoked Jupiter to show signs of his presence. If the signs were auspicious, the augur traced an axis on the ground from north to south called Cardo, and one from east to west called Decumano. At the intersection of the axis, valuable gifts and coins were buried. This was true for temples as well as for cities. Temples were generally oriented along the polar axis of the Cardo, with an entrance to the south, or along the Decumanus with an entrance to the east. The quadrants are directions that must be taken into account not only in building a temple, but also during rituals. Divinities such as Janus and the 12 gods of consent, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, Vulcan, Apollo, Juno, Minerva, Ceres, Venus, Diana, Vesta, are ideally placed in the left postica, northeast. More to the north, Janus and Jupiter, more to the east, Mars, Juno and Minerva. The deities of earth and nature are placed between east and southwest. The chthonic deities, that is, of the subsoil, between west and northwest. The Manes and the underworld gods to the west, while Saturn to the northwest, and the gods superiores et involuti, unknowable and completely transcendent, dwell exactly to the north. This is no coincidence, as the polar direction, the north, represents immutability, eternity. The north celestial pole, which today we identify with the North Stars, is the only point in the sky that does not move. Without motion there is no time, not even the perpetual one of the calendar cycle, but eternity. The point represents the transcendence of the space of the entire known cosmos, as well as the transcendence of time, which instead manifests itself in all other places of the sky. In that point, in this singularity, symbolically dwells what is not manifest, but what is hidden from everything that proceeds from there. Hence the orientation of the Roman temple between manifestation in the south and full transcendence in the north. A divine cosmology is therefore reflected in the temple, and by its stones and an earthy expression of a cosmic conception is there. It must be said that under the Greek influence, however, later temples were built also with the entrance to the east, with the solar rather than polar logic. Therefore, in the empire, there were temples either with the entrance to the south or with the entrance to the east. There are also divinities who reside in places that are not necessarily consecrated, such as the Lares, who dwells in every place for common use, such as houses, crossroads, and fields. Sacred woods or lucus are also places of divine presence. The city itself, within the confines of the pomerium, the sacred enclosure established by the augur, was conceivable in some respect as a sacred space. The pomerium was a border area between the city and the outside world, and could neither be inhabited nor plowed. When the city grew, the pomeriums had to be redefined by the augurs, but we will deal with this topic another time. The website of the traditional Roman movement, Saturnia Tellus, offers interesting articles on the whole sphere concerning the Gentile Roman religion, so if you don't know it, I invite you to give a look. As in-depth analysis of what is presented today, I want to point out the templum, the mirror of the sky, techniques, meaning, symbols, and secret of the Roman rite of foundation of the city by Paolo Casolari. This article is in Italian, but the site has an automatic translator available that works quite good. I also wanted to add that if you have any questions about the material presented so far, or even constructive criticism, suggestions, or simply want to write to me, you can contact me at the following email address: mtr.gidetica@gmail.com. So mtr.gidetica@gmail.com. So up to now we have seen the general principles of religion, the priestly offices, the calendar and its feasts, and today the places of worship. Therefore, we are ready to face the next topic, the ritual, which we will cover in the next lesson. Thanks for following us. Vale bene, in pace deorum.